Hey everyone, welcome back. It's December 11th, 2023. We're almost done with this fine year, and you are watching or listening to the Breakpoint Show. My name's Chris Woodruff. I am if this was a sports event, I would be the color commentator, and my two experts in terms of software development are with me. I've got Martin and Khalid. Khalid, I never can pronounce your last name, so I never try to. That's why I don't say Martin's last name. But so I just know that's why I just say first names around here. But we're winding down the year. We're gonna have two more episodes, one more episode after this for this year, and then we're gonna really come back in 2024 very strong. So we would love to get new ideas and what people want us to talk about in 2024. So please, if you're on YouTube, comment down below, subscribe, send us emails. We have ways to get a hold of us from our website, which is breakpointshow.dev. And I'm going to kick off the topic. So we're going to be looking at all two developer surveys that I think are really insightful for this year. One is the JetBrains developer survey, and the other one is the developer survey from Stackoverflow. And I think they both look really good. There's a lot of good information in them. So I'm just going to be asking our two experts what they think about certain aspects of those surveys, and maybe I'll fill in some funny banter to make everyone laugh. But the first thing is now this disclaimer: the two experts do work at JetBrains, but I think JetBrains has one of the better surveys, and it's interesting, and we'll put all the links in the show notes so you can see for yourself these surveys. But there was a question there: which ASP.NET Core technologies do you use? And it is interesting that the Blazor stuff, minimal API, are like 20% or less. Can you guys, what do you guys think about that? Those insight into how people use .NET?
Yeah, I guess to clarify for folks too, like the JetBrains developer ecosystem survey asked about 30,000 JetBrains customers. I guess they could also be non-JetBrains customers, just developers.
Yeah, exactly.
Ecosystem. So about 30,000 people responded. Not all of them obviously are doing .NET. We support a slew of other ecosystems. Primarily Java is kind of our big pond there, right, Martin? Right?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
So just so that people understand like how many folks asked, I will also say that all this information is publicly available. So if you want to use it in any of your content, look at the numbers, maybe look at it differently. All this information is available. But Chris, to your point, I'm looking at the question: which ASP.NET Core technologies do you use? Funny enough, Web API is at 78%. MVC is 64%. Razor Pages comes in at 40%. We joked last time, Chris, that we're going to start a drinking game that every time I mention Razor Pages.
So, yeah. So we all have
right,
to drink.
Here we go.
No.
All right, start drinking, folks.
But it's interesting. I mean, it really is. It shows you kind of there's two sides of .NET. There's the side that is pushed, and there's the side that is honestly used in production.
Oh, that's spicy the way you phrase that, but
Well,
I have more
truth
spice
hurts.
to add even.
Truth
but
hurts.
but I will say, like, I think the MVC pattern is clearly something that's been adopted across ecosystems. So whether you love it or you hate it, it's something that's familiar to folks coming into .NET, or maybe folks going out of .NET to go to things like Ruby on Rails or Django, or even saw today there's a Rust library called Loco, which adopts kind of the Ruby on Rails pattern. So MVC is really familiar. I think the minimal API approach is very similar to Node. So, but I don't really see a lot of people moving out of the JavaScript ecosystem anytime soon. So that could explain why those numbers are so low. But
I think that is indeed a good explanation for those numbers, because you will see that things like Web API and so on are very prominent in enterprise environments. And typically, when it's like a small team or a small organization, you will see people start to work with MVC or Razor pages and so on to build their front ends. I do think that Blazor Server and WebAssembly also play a role there. But in the bigger organizations, what you'll typically see is that you have a front-end team using React or Vue or Angular or things like that, whereas the backend team is working, for example, with .NET and SQL Server or Oracle or some of the bigger databases to provide the backend services for that front ends.
Yeah. And that's where you see Web API, because it's been around for longer, and there's more skills in that. So when I said there's stuff that's being pushed and there's stuff being used, do we need, I think, like, I like minimal API. And to be honest, if you take a look at the performance numbers compared to Web API and minimal API, compare it to Node, I mean, it is so much more proficient, like faster, less resources, that someone in the JavaScript kind of area should look at building APIs in .NET now, because it is so much faster than Node. And it's almost getting to the point where .NET APIs can be developed almost as fast as Rust. So you're looking at like .NET compared to a like close to the metal type of language like C++ and Rust, which is kind of surprising.
yeah, I guess to me, I've been thinking about what you just said. And I think it's important to think about performance, right? Like our community's always said performance is a feature to some degree, right? But I also think hyper focusing on performance does a disservice to kind of the software development process as a whole, because the thing that other ecosystems might do a little better is like, having more ideas, having more approaches to solving problems, being faster to deliver those solutions, right? Like, we're like .NET is just getting around to really optimizing for things like containerization, like in .NET 8, whereas other ecosystems have like baked that in. Package management was basically new when other ecosystems had it. So like .NET sometimes trails in the idea territory. So when you're talking about speed, we need to also talk about like speed to market, and .NET hasn't always been at the forefront. Tell me if I'm wrong. Tell me in the comments.
No, you're not wrong, Martin. What do you think?
No, I think it is true. I think it's true, but I still think that, I mean, like you say, there is this push towards Blazor Server and WebAssembly and so on. And I do think it will see adoption, but the question becomes, if the paradigm of moving your application from, say, MVC to Razor WebAssembly or Blazor WebAssembly and Blazor Server, if you have to move to that paradigm and that technology stack, maybe companies might also be reevaluating things into using one of the more mature currently frameworks that already exist and have existed for a long time, like again, like React and Vue and Angular and so on.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm curious to see where this goes, and this is definitely a question that I want to see the answer to next year as well, to see how it evolves.
Well, and performance is just one facet of the entire architecture. Because I do think that what we're really talking about is more on the architecture level, because you have to look at price and performance and ease of use and skill set when you're looking at solutions for your organizations. There's many more things beyond just the technology sometimes, and you do have to look at everything. So you're right. If I have something that is 10 times faster for the end user, but is 100 times slower to the developer, it's not really advantageous to use that technology to build out solutions. But I do think .NET is catching up. .NET, what is it? Aspire, which I'm not a huge fan of that name, but that's doesn't take away from what that
what do you mean?
Project is.
Good old Aspire.
Yeah. Yeah. But I do think that that's starting down a good road. I hope the problem is it's closed source. So I wish they would have open sourced it, so then someone could kind of build it out for AWS. But I see why Microsoft doesn't, because they're trying to maximize Azure. But I do wish that someone would build something like that for the AWS side, and maybe Amazon is looking at that, or maybe Amazon and JetBrains are looking at something like that. Who knows? So
interesting thing there, by the way. Aspire is mostly open source since the release of .NET 8. So before that, it seems to have been developed closed source or with a smaller group, but it is now open.
It is.
And the components that were released are all focused towards Azure, but I've seen issues on the AWS GitHub and so on that they're actively looking into it and seeing if they can add components as well.
Oh, nice. Well, that is really good, because it would be nice, and it would be nice to figure out a way truly to build out solutions that were multi-cloud. Because I think locking into one cloud for large organizations is sometimes a hindrance, and going multi-cloud can really be a positive when potentially when you have outages and stuff like that. But so we have that.
So since we talked about Blazor adoption, maybe we should scroll up the page. There's an interesting question, which runtimes do .NET users regularly use? And in the 2023 column, this is the breakdown. So 38% of folks, remember this survey was done before .NET 8, so there's no .NET 8 in this question, but in 2023, 38% of respondents are using .NET 7, 38% are also using .NET 6, 10% .NET 5. But then here's the real kicker. 45% say they are still using some version of .NET framework, which is 4.8.
Yeah.
And then 8% are using Mono. I assume those folks are still using Xamarin Forms or Unity game development. So.
Well, and we can't even assume it's 4.8 for .NET framework. I mean, there might be a lot of people that are still 4.6,
3.5.
3.5. I mean,
I saw it's 1.1.
Who knows?
I saw a screenshot the other day. Somebody posted like a Visual Studio splash screen of like, I forget. It was the old version of Visual Studio, and I was thrown back in time. It was like looking into a time machine.
So. I know people that have like VMs. They have like 4 or 5 different VMs on their machine, because each one is a different and old environment for Visual Studio. Like they'll have like some old like Windows Vista with some like old version of Visual Studio and some old version of .NET Framework, because they don't want everything on the same machine to kind of get cross-wired and stuff. So yeah, it's interesting out there. But yeah, I mean, .NET Framework is still a huge platform.
Well,
also one interesting thing in that chart that is on the website there is that it seems that around 2019 there was a big drop off towards .NET Core, and people jumping onto that and adopting that one. But it does look like since 2021, maybe we are in the long tail of .NET Framework not going away yet. So I have no idea where that is going. I also hope that people are looking into migrating their software to a newer .NET version, even though .NET Framework is still supported. But I will say, as a .NET developer, it is valuable to jump ship and jump onto the newer .NET versions.
Well, very much.
It is interesting though, like in the same breath of like, why is Blazor adoption not increasing? You could ask, why is .NET Framework stagnating around 40, 45, 50%? And you could probably point back to the cost of doing a migration. Probably a lot for these organizations is just, it's too costly, right? Like whatever your architecture or infrastructure investments have been, or even team investments and build up have been, to kind of retool your entire organization just to end up back at the same point you're currently at, it might just be way too expensive for a lot of people. So I don't know.
Yeah, we're in a kind of a different economic space right now with, are we in a recession? Are we pre-recession? So I can see a lot of organizations that are gun shy spending that capital that they've been hoarding since the pandemic, to make sure that they have enough money to survive whatever is wherever we're at or is coming down the road.
All right, Chris, what's our next question? Let's get another one in there.
Yeah, so there's an interesting one. Which programming, scripting, or markup languages have you used in the last 12 months? And so naturally, JavaScript is at the top, Python, but what languages do you see on this list that you think are bound for like bigger and better growth for the future? Because to be honest, like C# is in the middle. It's like at 21%. And the problem is that there's also this likely to adopt, and it's kind of in the middle also of the numbers. So is C#? So two things. What languages do you see in the future being maybe something for people to look for new skills? And two, is C#, do you think C# has growth, or do you think it is kind of a language that a certain niche of the big community uses?
Martin, you go first. I want to hear what Martin has to say.
It's a tough one. Like if you look at the previous years in the same question, then it looks like C# is starting to stagnate a little bit, or at least it has been stable for a while, and usage keeps going up and down a little bit, but not very noticeably. So I have no idea how to answer that one. I would love to say that C# is growing, but apparently the numbers aren't. So maybe we should also look at the Stack Overflow survey and see what came out there and see if that's comparable as well.
Yeah. So with that one, C# is, well, that's, I'm looking at.
Well, while you look at that, I guess I can maybe give my perspective. Like, clearly the top languages in programming, scripting, and markup languages, which I think is on the languages section of our developer ecosystem. So if you folks want to go look at that, you can. JavaScript is high just because I think most people are working in the web stack. So I understand like JavaScript's going to be pretty high. That's clear because HTML is coming in the third spot, HTML and CSS, which for me personally, the web platform is doing some amazing things. So I can see why those two are top there. Data science is really high. So I think Python will continue to see a lot of success in the upcoming years, just because data science, AI, stuff like that. SQL coming in as well at 52%. To do data science, you need to understand how to group data. So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So the one I put out in our little Slack chat, the one I'm looking at on Stack Overflow, and I like the Stack Overflow because it has two numbers for each language. It has the has kind of desired and admired. So it has kind of like, what do you use and what would you like to use, or which languages do you like really have a high aspect for?
Mm-hmm.
And like Rust is way out there, like and it's surprising because Rust is kind of down in the JetBrains towards the bottom, but in the Stack Overflow, it's in the top 10 in terms of desired and admired. And so it's sitting at like 30% desired, which to me sounds like it's where it's being used, but then it's at this all-time high, like 85% admired. So, and if I take a look at the same thing, C# is right after Rust. So it has a desired of 21% and an admired of 63%, which is still very good. So I kind of see, and let's just say Stack Overflow, Khalid looked it up. Stack Overflow had 3 times as many respondents than the JetBrains.
Yep.
And so maybe the numbers are a little different because of just having 3 times as many survey.
I will also say, like, the Stack Overflow is like developers across tooling and ecosystems and chains. The JetBrains one is still like statistically significant, but it may skew more towards kind of the tools that JetBrains offers. So I think at the time that this survey was out, we hadn't released Rust Rover just yet, which is kind of like our Rust IDE. So that might explain why there's less Rust enthusiasts answering the survey, but that's conjecture on my part.
Well,
one interesting that I found is in the most popular technology section of the Stack Overflow survey. There's a nice breakup of the responses in terms of programming languages between professional developers and learning to code. I have no idea where the line between those lies, but if you look at learning to code, for example, you will see the typical languages that you find lots of tutorials online, like HTML, CSS, JavaScript, Python, and so on. But also the typical languages that, at least here in Europe, are given in universities and so on. So like Java, C++, and C, and so on. And you will see a big difference between that and professional developers, where JavaScript is clearly winning out. Python and so on is also in the top. But then you also see that C# is getting higher in that list for professional developers. So I wonder if in .NET at least we have the issue that not a lot of developers are learning C# in school anymore.
Mhm.
And people who are self-taught, for example, don't think of C# as a language they want to learn. Whereas in professional environments, people are still using it anyway because their entire stack is built on C# or one of the other languages that are higher up in that list.
Yeah, but C# is still top. It's still top 10 in both lists, so it still has a strong presence. But yes,
can I give
go ahead.
Can I give a hot take?
Sure.
Like, I do feel sometimes we fetishize the language and like syntax and like, oh, look how pretty or look how terse this language is. But I think for a lot of people, and this is my opinion, this isn't backed by science. We don't do science. I don't do science. I just take from the gut, people. But I think a lot of times we fetishize the languages, but you need to look at around like, what are people aiming to do with that language? So like back to the Stack Overflow survey, where there's like C++ is high on the learning to code section. I would guess a lot of people are learning C++. I did air quotes, by the way, for folks listening. Learning C++, not because they love C++ as a language, but because it's tied to things like game development, things like Unreal Game Engine or custom game engines. So folks who are interested in making video games are likely going to be doing C++ or C# or maybe some kind of scripting language. So you can't fully detach a language's success from the things that people are using it to do. I guess that's my point.
You're right. Yeah, and so the kind of the last one is online. This is one that's really interesting to me, and we're trying to keep this around 30 minutes, so we're not going to go too long on all this stuff. But the last one was in Stack Overflow. They had a thing around platform or online resources to learn how to code. And before we started this episode, we were really talking a lot about like how developers learn and conferences versus like online. And this is really interesting on how they learn. Like what we're doing right now, podcast is only at like 8%. So I either see that as like, hey, like podcasts can only go up, but we're still
Khalid, you're screaming your hot takes into the voids that is
I
that is
know.
podcasts.
But it's interesting that that 90% of people still learn from technical documentation.
Mm-hmm.
Just going out to the maker, either the organization that makes the tool or supports the language and learns that way. Now, and then their number two is, I will say, Stack Overflow says number two is Stack Overflow, which, okay, well, I'll that's a little, yeah, whatever. But this is online resources, but I would love to know how many people like go to in-person events versus online. And there really isn't I didn't see a survey around that, but like as we've seen in the last 5 years, and it was happening before the pandemic, and I think the pandemic just pushed it, like put the death nail into it. Really, we saw the end of meetups and user groups and stuff like that. And a lot of those groups haven't come back since the pandemic. And we're really seeing a big impact on conferences right now with numbers. Attendee numbers are down, and also sponsorship money is way down also. And we're not going to go into all that. But do you guys think that more people are just deciding to learn with online content than to go and meet up in person and learn new things?
As always, it depends, right? It's one of those questions where there will be a lot of opinions. I will say that if I look at what's happening with a lot of conferences, some are doing really well even after the pandemic. Others are struggling a little bit, and I guess it boils down to at JetBrains we actually did during the pandemic a survey on this exact question. It's also published somewhere. I think it boils down to one of the interviews that I was sitting on with one of the people that we were talking to, who said that if there's a conference somewhere in the US, somewhere in a business park where there's nothing around, and there's 5 sessions I want to attend, and there's 3 in the same agenda that I do not want to attend, there's no way for me to get out and go shopping or do something else during those 3 hours. Whereas if you're doing this online, it's easy to walk out for a couple of hours and join back in, or even watch a replay a little bit later. So I think that is at least one of the key drivers between going to conferences or watching online.
So are you recommending that conferences build like a barbed wire fence to keep people in? Like
that and tasers.
Tasers, that makes a lot of sense. That's how we increase conference talk attendance. It's perfect.
Clockwork Orange.
Everyone gets eyelid clamps.
Yeah. Well, and I think we are going through a fundamental change, is that when we were kind of coming up through the ranks, when we were new in the community, things like books and conferences and user groups were really the only way to get new information. There wasn't as much viable way, like YouTube wasn't around, and it wasn't easy to get video from a cost standpoint, or from a like uploading and downloading content was still pretty slow. But today, anyone can upload a video to YouTube. Heck, us 3 guys, if we can upload a video to YouTube and people can watch it, then anyone can.
Hey, this takes skill, Chris.
I know.
Don't diminish our value.
Well, I'm just saying anyone can. So, but I think we're in this problem of there's so much online content. It's hard to find the good content. And so I think the next thing will be how do people find and curate that the content that they really need to learn. And it's just going to impact in-person events even more. So
sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, there is, I think, a fundamental shift in how people want to learn. But when you look at the top 3 of technical documentation, let's call Stack Overflow a community forum, right? Because that's what essentially it is. And blogs, which are kind of like personal perspectives, they still rank in the top 3. If you think about it, technical documentation is where people want to go for like a definitive source of truth. That's always good. Stack Overflow is really more about getting an idea of like, what is the community doing? And then blogs are really, for me, more about what is someone I respect and trust think about solving a problem. If you think about all 3 of those things, it's really about individuals, communities, and ultimately trust. Whereas everything really underneath that starts to kind of delve into like content, and like there still can be valuable, but to get the information out of them, like how-to videos or online coding sessions, those are like harder to get that immediate value out of those things. You have to really kind of like sit there and watch it and get through it. So
although to be fair, For that question, I would love to see a breakdown based on age range, because
I
I'm
would
noticing
too.
a shift with younger people who are watching more of the videos, and blogs are going down there, for example. But yeah, I would love to see that breakdown, that specific one for that question by age.
Yeah.
I mean, right there at 3%, we see TikTok dances are how people would like to learn coding. No, I'm just joking, folks. That's not really on there. Although, if you would like to see Martin do TikTok dances, please comment
Yeah.
below.
Please give a like.
Yeah.
For every like,
If we get
Martin will do a dance.
600,000 subscribers, I will definitely do this.
Okay. Awesome. So we're gonna wrap up, but let's do kind of our final thought. So Khalid, what's your final thought about what we've been talking about today?
My final thought is, like, clearly there's a lot of diversity in terms of what problems people are trying to solve, how they're solving those problems. Clearly in the last like decade, we've seen Python kind of rise to dominance, especially with like the advent of data science and AI. So there's that. JavaScript still is very dominant because folks love the web. It's a really easy ecosystem to get into. So those things aren't surprising, but it also makes me think about the next decade and what's going to be prominent. So yeah, it's overall, those are my thoughts.
Martin.
I was going to echo that sentiment. It is a quote from somewhere, but I don't recall from where. But I can't wait for the future to happen and see what will go on with all different languages and so on. It's great to see evolution in languages. It's great to see evolution in how people are learning things. And I'm just curious of whether the current trends that we see in both of the surveys are going to continue or going to change because of AI, for example. So let's see what the future brings.
Yeah, I think we're at a crossroads. So I will echo both. I think we have a lot of different ways to learn, probably the most that we've ever had at our disposal. And we have lots of disruption that I think we're going to see over the next year or two. I think AI will not take away from jobs, but they will disrupt jobs, and people will have to learn to incorporate AI to make their jobs more enriching or impactful or whatever. But yeah, I think we are going to see 2024 be interesting from the community standpoint. I think there's going to be a lot of things that we'll look back and and we're going to see a lot of things that maybe we were sad about and from because they're going away or they're changing. But change is good, right? Change is what I think every community needs. And I think, to be honest, I think we've stagnated in some communities for a little while. And I will take, this is a hot take. I think our .NET community is a little stagnant right now. I think Blazor is helping kind of get some new ideas and new things and minimal APIs. We just need to get people to look at it, and organizations and leaders and managers to look at that, to see that there's benefits in those also. But yeah, any other last comments?
No, I think that's probably a good place to end it. So
okay,
absolutely.
Cheers and razor pages to everyone out there.
Yeah, and sword product, right? Yeah. But we want to thank everyone. Please subscribe to the podcast on wherever you listen to us, Apple, Google, all the different platforms for
remember 600,000 and I will do a TikTok dance.
All of us, we will each do a TikTok dance.
Whoa, I don't know.
And Khalid will do a TikTok dance with his dogs. So we're gonna put that out there. But
I'm looking forward. Push the button.
Yeah, push the button. And on YouTube, go and like this. If you don't want to subscribe, at least give us a like, so the algorithm will push us out to more people. But we have one more episode left before the end of this year, so we'll look forward to seeing you one more time in 2023. So bye,
Bye everybody. Bye.
Bye, everyone. See ya.